Our guest today, Donna Allegra, serves as an advisory and a design director for Argyle. Living in Manhattan, Donna has been in the proxy design business for nearly 10 years, so she really knows her stuff. I'm Brock Romanek today on Zippy Point. All right, Donna, Director Tenure. I'm really interested to hear what you're going to say about what companies are disclosing about tenure in a way that's usable disclosure, because it's a hot topic.
It sure is. It sure is. And companies want to show they've got the right board, and investors want to know that there is a balance of tenure and of diversity, and that the board is appropriately refreshed. Those are the interests that we want to bring together, and these are the companies that communicate that they have the right board, and investors want to know that the tenure is balanced, that there is an appropriate gender balance, and there is an appropriate balance of diversity. So when we work with companies to help them present their board on the fact that they have the right board, there are some things that we have to look at. So there's a thoughtful approach to refreshing the board and the process. And the requirement to board refreshment can be something like, the pandemic and what we're going through right now. Which places a new and unique challenge on boards? Perhaps there's new skills that'll be necessary. Maybe there's changes in the strategy, into the risk, the market. So there's a process to refreshment. And the search and recruitment process by which candidates are found and the steps that companies go through, and then there's finally the nominees, there's the new balance. So it's the board's approach and how they go about recruiting directors, and then an overview of the director nominees. So I want to start by looking at boards and what they consider in the refreshment process. Let's start with BlackRock. BlackRock and their board refreshment process. And we start with a graphic, and we learn that this is an ongoing process, as it should be. The governance committee is responsible for identifying and evaluating potential director candidates, reviewing board and committee composition, and making recommendations to the full board. This ongoing process includes, when we see board and committee evaluations, we see director tenure, we see board committee rotation, director onboarding, and director recruitment. This is all backed up with concise content explaining the process, and as you go through the proxy, they explain it further. So you see the thought process that goes through. Another really good example is GM. And Rick Hansen and John Kim's board disclosures are really thoughtful. One of the things you'll notice is that they have the right board at the right time. We also really like their step-by-step process. Their director recruitment process, candidate recommendations, governance committee, board of directors, shareholders are explaining each of the steps, and what is the result? 3 new directors added since 2018, bringing fresh perspectives to the board. This is really well done. Another really good example that we like to show and what we like to discuss is Allstate and their process. Again, this is Dan, Deborah, and Leanne giving the investor a clear understanding of the rigor that goes into selecting board members. And if we just start looking at the right side of the page, the right-hand side of the page, a nomination process for board election. First step, consider current board skill sets and needs. Check conflicts of interest and references. Nominating and governance committee dialogue. They've considered 194 candidates since 2010. Meet with the qualified candidates, nominating and governance committee dialogue, and board dialogue and decision. They've added 4 highly qualified directors in the last 5 years. That's pretty good. Allstate also goes the extra mile. One thing that I do want to call out here, and if we go back to their board bios and take a look here, you'll see down below under Allstate board service from Mr. Askew. Director since 2014, 6 years of tenure. It's right there. They're thinking about the reader and giving them all the information that they really need. I want to also now show you a little bit about Cognizant. And here I have a spread only because it wasn't fair to break this up into separate pages. So But it's really important that you see this process of determining the desired director qualifications and all of the steps that they're going through. Identify candidates, board recommends director nominees, annual shareholder vote, and annual self-evaluation. They really are showing you here all of the rigors that go into, again, their board refreshment. And I think this is really important to see. And the end result, if we focus in here on the right, identify candidates, you'll see that recent director appointments in this blue box here. You'll see that the 3 director nominees appointed to the board since the 2019 annual meeting were each identified and evaluated through a director search process, and kind of takes you through it all. But again, this is really something that when we speak of tenure, we need to go and we need to look at diversity, and we also need to look, though, at the refreshment process. Lockheed Martin. And you'll even notice that instead of, this is in their proxy summary and a lot of where we show highlights. And most companies will show you board diversity, again, 40%, that's terrific. Board refreshment. Well, a lot of times this is called tenure, but I think it's really important that they here use board refreshment instead of board tenure. And you do see down below that, they do talk about average tenure, 6 years. But this is, and actually when I saw this page, I thought that it was just really a really well executed page, because we're showing here board composition, and we are showing skills. And we are also showing board effectiveness. We're showing the meaningful refreshment. So everything is encapsulated onto this one page. And I think that's really important that that Maritza is thinking about the investors and how they're going to view the document. Another really good example would be the Occidental proxy. This is in their proxy summary. And here, very clearly, they've explained and they go into detail about their board refreshment. But when you look at the proxy summary and they give it to you in a snapshot, tenure, the average tenure of our board's director nominee is 4.1 years, which reflects the balance of company experience and new perspectives. And that's what investors want to see. I can go further and show you here in CBS. Again, we talk about director independence, but here is director tenure. We're talking diversity of gender and background. Again, really important that people see this. And, sometimes you have to look at this as, who is the reader? Is this somebody that wants to read the entire proxy word for word? Or is this the investor that just wants to glance through a few sections? Or is this, and focus on maybe the CD&A section? Or sometimes is it just the investor that's looking at this and just maybe wanting to, get an overview? So again, what this page allows and what the proxy summary will allow for is that overview of what is featured and what will be focused upon within the proxy. And AFLAC, here over to the right, we have information about our board members, board tenure, 2020 independent director nominees. And what's really interesting down below is that 7 of our 10 independent director nominees are minority and or women. And I think that's really important today, that is stated, that they're doing that and they're clearly stating that for us.
It's great to see that Mr. Amos is still the CEO of AFLAC. I remember being at a conference, it's probably over 10 years ago, where he gave a presentation and the commercials had just come out that became famous with the duck saying AFLAC, AFLAC. And he had his people hand out to everyone in the audience
the ducks,
toy ducks that when you squeeze them, they gave the AFLAC, AFLAC. And he was a great speaker. He really was. Mm-hmm. It was also great to see the graphic. I used to work at Lockheed Martin 20 years ago, and right then they'd become a conglomerate of a bunch of other defense contractors. And the board had swollen up to 17 people because they kept absorbing a director here and there every time they did a deal. And 17 directors is really hard to manage and hard for them to be a collegial board where you can have a lot of conversation when there's 17 people. And now they're down to 10. So it was great because I haven't been keeping up on the size of the board. But
so you can see that every company has a process and every process is different. And every company presents that just a little bit differently. But everybody is working together to express and explain board tenure and diversity.
Thank you very much, Donna. It was great.